All right, today on the podcast, we have Paul Cooke. Paul Cooke is a wealth of Canadian motorsports knowledge, history. He was the team manager of Comstock Racing. Comstock was Ford's effort in Canada, racing Cobras, racing GT40s. He went on to manage George Eaton's Can-Am effort of the Eaton family, as well as others, Formula Atlantic efforts and Formula One efforts. So if you guys are into motorsports history, there's a ton of stuff here for you. Enjoy.
Canada, and I took that shipping label off the car. So here we have here. This is one McLaren Formula One racing car. Chassis, blah blah blah, engine, blah blah blah, going to Paul Cooke at Comstock Racing.
Canadian Grand Prix.
Canadian Grand Prix. How many people would have?
That's pretty cool. For account of McLaren Racing Ltd. Air France.
Yeah.
Wow.
How many people would have? Now, the problem with that is the car came loose in the airplane. Back and forth.
Were there major repairs?
Took the front off the car down to the bulkhead. So I rebuilt everything from the bulkhead forward.
You had to do that.
Yeah, because we had. Yeah. And by the time Bruce couldn't send anybody over because they were all too tired and they had to sleep. So I said, okay. He said, well, I'll leave it to you, because Bruce was a friend. So he said, well, I'll leave it to your best judgment. So I
just put the finishing touches on the car.
We got everything. Had to go do the master cylinders, got torn off. Everything from the bulkhead forward got torn off.
Jeez.
Fortunately, the body was not on the car.
Yeah.
It wasn't, but anyway. So there you go. The theme there is that there never was a major race team in Canada.
Right.
Never.
Yeah.
And there hasn't been one like that. There's been some come and go, but there was no, I think there's a couple of race teams now. But
with all these racing guys, I always like to start kind of at the beginning, because everyone has their different story on how they were introduced to racing, how they first experienced the racetrack or race cars or go-karts, whatever it may be. What was that for you?
The first introduction into automotive competition was when I was in school, and I knew I was going to do something when I came out of school, earn a living, and then do something from a avocation point of view.
High school or college?
Just I started in high school.
Yeah.
And then I said, okay, what I want to do is I'm going to try to get a first place trophy in every form of motorsport in Canada that's available to me.
Well, that was a lofty goal.
It was a lofty goal. 17 years later, I had accumulated almost all of what I set out to do. But that also, by that time came around, I was also heavy duty into professional motorsports as a vocation. So,
right.
But that's how it started.
So but was there a first time you were taken to a racetrack, or did you go to Mosport or something like that to watch the Formula One race, something like that, or even earlier than that, maybe?
Yeah, I've been around before Formula One in Canada. Being 87 years old right now, I have a long history back to when motorsport was what it was in the time. And what was available to me at the time was drag racing. I had a 47 Ford, and I decided, well, let me try something here. So I went to an event put on by Bempsey or something like that. I think it was at Edenvale. And so they told me all about classes and all. I didn't understand. All I wanted to do is put the car in gear, open the throttle, and go. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
Never mind all this other stuff. So anyway, I came away from that event feeling very happy, but missing 2 gears in the transmission. So I drove home in high gear all the way.
Yeah.
I then learned that there's a little more to it than that. So that started a whole process of changing cars, and I would look at. I was in the advertising and sales promotion field,
Okay.
and I was able to earn a reasonably good living at that. And then, as you well know, you can make a small fortune in motorsport, provided you start with a large one. And that's something I learned throughout my life. If you can't afford it, don't do it, because you're just going to disappoint yourself. So anyway, it all carried all the way through that I started racing cars, and the first car I raced as a sports car racer was with a friend who had an MGTC, and I had worked with him all year, and we're the last race down at Harewood, and he said, you drive the car. And I said, I don't have a license. He said, they won't check. So it was the last race of the weekend. So he said, he had used my helmet. Nobody looks at that sort of stuff. So I said, which way do I go? Can we go that way? So anyway, I get in the car, and the race started. And I found myself, these people aren't very fast. So I said, they're all following this cow path. I think I'll go a different way. So I started altering the lines through the corners and ended up in first place. And so on the 12th lap of a 15-lap race, here I am, not knowing what I'm doing, except that I'm leading. And going through what they call big torque at the old Harewood Acres.
Where is that track?
Where is it? Jarvis, Ontario. But it's not there anymore because they converted it into a refinery. And that refinery's gone now.
Okay, wow.
The TC had 19-inch wheels. And going at the end of the turn, I was obviously abusing the 19-inch wheels, and they decided to unlace themselves as I entered the corner. So the first thing that went was a left front wheel collapsed, and then the right front wheel collapsed after that. So I ended up off in the cornfield, and so that was kind of interesting.
So you were leading, but it ended in a...
Yeah, it was sort of it was the end of the year, and it didn't hurt the car otherwise, and so then I just carried on and with other cars and won championships. And then rallying was a big sport. And I decided that in order to win a first place trophy in rallying, I couldn't be the driver. What I found is there were a lot of drivers, but there weren't very many navigators.
Okay.
So I went to self-schooling on how to be a good navigator, and I talked to a couple of the championship navigators, and they said, well, here's what you have to do. And so I did it. I like learning. Okay? I like learning from books. I probably in those days had every book written on motorsport. It didn't matter who wrote it, I would read it. So, or go to the library. In fact, I think I still have a book from the library. I should take it back. The idea of winning was not driving, it was being on time. So that's what I focused on, and in quotation marks, started winning races, winning rallies.
Okay.
So now,
as the navigator.
Wanted me as a navigator.
Okay, got it.
Got it?
Yep.
Because I could make them win.
Sure.
Okay. So that was pretty good. So I enjoyed that. And then Ford Motor Company was looking to do an event called the BCITF, British Columbia International Trade Fair Rally, from Montreal to Vancouver. And they were looking for someone to manage it. And they had seen my name in various places. So they called me and asked me if I would be the team manager for their international rally team. And I said, sure. I didn't know what it meant. So when I said yes, I didn't know what yes meant. But, managing, but as a professional manager, you manage, right? Make a list and do it. So the next thing you know, I have a bunch of cars shipped over to a Ford dealer. And so I start preparing them, but they were already prepared anyway because Ford in England prepared them. So the drivers came over. They said, well, we're missing a navigator. You're a navigator now, Paul. So not only did I manage the team, but I was also a navigator. And I managed to navigate, and these are well-known drivers, I managed to navigate my driver into rolling the car over in Dalmany, Saskatchewan.
In the flattest part of the country.
Yeah, that was the so that led to being asked to manage Comstock racing team.
Right. Now explain for all the Canadian race fans out there and I guess American race fans out there, people don't realize, I think, how big a deal Comstock racing was, how big a racing effort it was, and how important it was to that overall Ford racing effort of the time. How did Comstock come about, Comstock racing?
Comstock racing team came about because Chuck Rathgeb, the owner of Comstock, and we need to put that in perspective. He was the establishment jock in Canada. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of political parties, there's individuals they're very good at finance. Sure. Or they're very good at international relationships. Chuck was very good at being a jock.
Right. I've got written here that Chuck was like, a businessman, sportsman, climber, hunter, hot air balloon pilot, jet pilot, deep sea fisher. He was kind of like a Hemingway or something like that, or
exactly. But his race team was patently unsuccessful. Okay. Because while Chuck was good at a lot of things, what he was best at was managing Comstock to make it an extraordinarily successful company.
And they were an electrical company?
They were in a construction company. Okay. Their specialty was, at one point in time, and they became well known when Ontario switched from a 50-cycle to 60-cycle power. Okay. Comstock upgraded all electric motors in the province of Ontario. Okay. All of them. And what happened was he started racing cars by buying cars and finding someone to race them. Now, that combination is, as you well know yourself, is pretty tricky. You have to get that right to start off on the right foot. Well, when you don't know what the right foot is, it's like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Yeah. So Chuck went down many roads and spent a lot of money. Now, he also, in the company, bought Ford products for his trucks. Okay. So that created a link between Chuck Rathgeb, the sportsman, and Ford Motor Company, who at that stage of the game had an international mandate to establish a racing team in every country. Right. So Ford went to Comstock and said, we need to have a race team. And he said, okay. But they also said, but we're going to tell you who the manager's going to be. Oh, that was me.
Because of your rally across Canada?
Experience as a professional manager, my awareness of public relations, my awareness of do it right, do it properly, get on with it, and blah blah blah. So that came out of the advertising and sales promotion field. So those credentials worked well because I understood why Ford was doing it. Ford, the theory was by a lot of people, race on Sunday, sell on Monday. But that couldn't be farther from the truth. What the truth was win on Sunday, sell on Monday. Right. So they weren't in it to compete, they were in it to win. Because on Monday, they didn't want to have to say, oh, well, we ran our cars at a race and everybody had a good time. They wanted to prepare the ads that you won, so that those ads were being put out on Monday. So anyhow, I understood that link, and we started to put things together. Well, he had done a deal with a man by the name of Bill Sadler, and Bill Sadler from St. Catharines, Ontario, built what I would call hot rod sports cars. He built a chassis and put the biggest engine wins, okay? Mm-hmm. But the problem was the biggest engine breaks all the other components, but he didn't figure that out too early. Anyway, while there was a lot of flurry and there was a lot of activity, there was a lot of money spent at Comstock, there were no wins. Up to and including when Ford brought the first Cobra, 289 Cobra, and they brought it up to Comstock, and Comstock started to manage it, started to run it, but they couldn't get it. They couldn't stop it from breaking, and let alone winning.
And that was the first Cobra, yeah. And it came up here.
Car out of Shelby American, but it was their first one that Ken Miles had driven. So it came up to Canada.
Did he come up to test it at Mosport as well?
No, there's a lot of stories, and I had gone to Los Angeles to learn all about Shelby American, and the first time I went down there, I was out in the shop. They just said, go out in the shop, do what you want to. Don't get in anybody's way and don't steal anything, okay? But I really introduced myself to everybody in the shop. And anyhow, there was an announcement on the PA system with Mr. Paul Cooke of Ford Canada, please come to Mr. Shelby's office. So, okay, fine, I go trotting off to the office, and he says, have a seat. So I'm sitting where you are, and he said, I've heard a lot about you. And I said, well, not nearly as much as I've heard about you. So I said, I'm absolutely tickled pink to be sitting here. I'm very nervous. So I don't know what to expect. And he said, well, you can expect to be treated properly because that's the way we treat our partners. And he said, how long are you here for? I said, about 10 days. And he said, have you got a car? And I said, no, not yet. And he said, well, you do now. And he said, that's my car. It's out in the parking lot. You use it while you're here. Guess what it was?
Cobra. 289?
Yeah. But what a sweet vehicle. It excited me on one hand, and it scared me on another, because it had straight pipes on it. And they had told me, don't worry about that, because nobody here will ever stop a Cobra. They might stop you to look at it, but they won't stop you because you're making noise. And I said, okay, fine. So what eventually I found out is that the car was very attractive to women, because I went down to Hollywood with it one Saturday night, and I found out it was just really a magnet, and that was fun. It was a lot of fun. But anyway, I was sorry to let it go when I took it back.
I bet.
But it was really good, really good. And no matter where you went, people, it was a precursor to the GT40s stories where that was your calling card, you know, Paul Cooke, GT40.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that started a good relationship between myself and Carol Shelby, and also with Ken Miles and the rest of the crew.
So Comstock had the mandate from Ford to be the Canadian, Ford representative racing team, and it started with Cobras or Mustangs. Cobras, right? Early '60s, and not a whole ton of success at Comstock with the Cobras.
Oh yeah. See, what happened was they took it up to the Comstock racing team was in the northeast corner of Kennedy Road and 401.
Okay.
And it was a huge facility there because Comstock at that point in time was manufacturing HVAC for Canadian mines. So when you and that's where their expertise was, and you can imagine those heating apparatus vents were 1/4-inch steel. Okay. You start making vents out of 1/4-inch steel, and so anyway, the guys in the shop really liked the fact that we had taken over part of the shop they had where they overhauled all their portable welding equipment. They cut it in half, and when it was announced, and so this half of the building would be Comstock Racing Team, and the other half would be the repair shop for portable welders. And the people running the portable welder shop weren't very happy about it. But I said, well, you know what? Don't tell me. I'll get Mr. Rathgib on the line. You can complain to him, and then you probably don't have to bring your lunch to work tomorrow. But anyway, we got when Mr. Rathgib wanted something, then you really paid attention to it. So what transpired was they weren't doing well with the Cobra. So Jack Still at Ford Motor Company, who looked after all that kind of stuff, called me and said, what do we have to do? And I said, well, when we go up there to look at the car and to work out, we have no cooperation whatsoever. So have the car brought down to Wheats's Motors, which was a small family shop, car repair shop on Mount Pleasant Road, north of Eglinton Avenue. And that's where I met Epi.
Epi Weeds.
I got out of the advertising and sales promotion business, and as part of my 17 trophies I was looking for, I decided to become a mechanic. So I went to night school and blah, blah, blah. So then, and to do that, I met Epi, and Epi said, why don't you come and work for us? And so I did that, and so that's where we got into, I helped him with his, he had a reputation for building a Morris Minor, where he built it, and I helped him with it, and we started beating all the 3.8 Jaguars that were around with a Morris Minor. And anyhow, then we got into building the Alpine. So I said, let's go to Roots Motors and see if we can get an Alpine from them. And then so I went with him and said, I said to Roots, you don't, with the new Roots product, the new Alpine, you don't want to be competing against yourself because people will pick up on that right away. So I said, why don't you give us a car at Wheats's Motors, and we'll compete against you. So this will be the big factory competing against a dealer. And the people like that kind of stuff. So anyway, they bought it. So they said, well, send the order in for the car. So I went through the order sheet and I took every accessory you could find. And so the car got delivered on a Thursday morning. And Epi and I went out to Roots Motors and brought it back. And by 7 o'clock that night, we'd stripped the car. And then we started selling everything we took off it, and that's how we financed the racing for the year.
That's great. That's great. And this was happening simultaneously with Comstock or prior to?
It was simultaneously because, interestingly enough, they sent the Cobra down. Well, we're building the Alpine.
Yep.
And because of every book I ever read about racing, included reading a lot of technical books, and going to night school, mechanical stuff came easily to me. So we were able to make a good Alpine. So the Comstock brought the Cobra down and all the bits and pieces, and they left it with us at Wheats's. And then Epi and I would work on the Alpine from 5 o'clock to 7 o'clock, and then work on the Cobra from 7 o'clock to whatever. And we just found so much wrong with it. And started putting all the pieces together, and blah, 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 blah. And then Epi started winning with it, and we won almost every race with the car after that. And so then on the Canadian Championship weekend, the Cobra had to run in the same race as the Alpine. So we wanted to win the championship for the Alpine class. So we said, well, I'll drive it. So I drove the Alpine, and Epi drove the Cobra in the same race. And Roots thought, this will be the first time we beat them, because we got Craig Fisher running our car, and he can beat Paul anytime. So, but Paul had different ideas, and so the only part of our Alpine that Craig Fisher saw were the rear tail lights. So that's
and wrapped up the championship. Wow. So would you say that the kind of turning point or the increase in performance for Comstock came from going to Epi Wheats, having him as a driver, and kind of you two going through the car?
Yes. Okay. Epi was a natural mechanic. He could fix anything without breaking it. And as you know, being a mechanic almost suggests to some people that you're third rate career. Well, no, not really, because even in this day and age in 2022, you go open the hood of your car and tell me what you think you see, and because you don't know what you're looking at, and but a mechanic does. So you want to fix your own car, go have at it, but you best phone the rental car company because you'll need them. So anyhow, it's so we got everything working, and then they said, okay, as of January the 1st, Paul Cooke is the team manager for Comstock, and let everybody know that. So I showed up the first week of January at Comstock Racing Team in the northeast corner of Kennedy Road and 401, and there was nobody there. They all quit. Why? They didn't want to be found out that they didn't know what they were doing. So rather than have that, that's just my opinion, and I think it bore truth. They all got together and decided to leave, so that their reputations weren't tarnished. They were all tarnished by their record. They just when people aren't very good at things, sometimes they find reasons why not to clear their own plate, right? So anyway, so I said, okay, fine. If that's the way it is, that's the way it is. You just saved me a lot of trouble, because now I'm going to get people to come in. We had there were 3 of us on full time, and then we had a lot of volunteers. So I was very careful about the selection of volunteers. But people wanted to help us because Epi had a really good reputation, and I had a good reputation, and people like to be associated with winners. They also like to be associated with underdogs. So if you're an underdog that's winning, people like you. It also attracted a lot of people to Wheats's Motors. That worked out well from a sales point of view. So anyhow, everything came together, and
Was there support from Ford Canada or for you guys at that time? Like, how involved was Ford as far as funding goes, or giving you guys cars? Like, how did that financially work out?
it financially worked out that they asked me how much I wanted to manage the Comstock racing team. And I said, okay, this is what I want in year 1, and for year 2, I'll tell you at the start of year 2. But I will not come to you during year 1. The other thing is, if you're going to give me a budget, then there must be someone in your organization that knows all about race teams and racing. And I don't think you do. So why don't we establish the budget in year 1? Because we have a 5-year program. Okay. And I said, you are telling me to race on Sunday. You're telling me to win on Sunday and sell on Monday. Then don't give me a budget. Let's just see how it goes, and I'm not going to take advantage of anything. So the one thing they did that made life a lot easier is they made Comstock Racing Team a Ford dealer. Okay. That meant I could place an order for parts at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I could go pick them up the next morning at 11. Right. Okay, in Rexdale. So when we started, now remember we were doing rallying as well. Mm-hmm. So the British Empire Motor Club Winter Rally was a huge event in Ontario in February, and it was Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Okay, and there were 100 entries, 120 entries, and we wanted to win that. So I think Comstock won it 3 times, once with the Anglias and twice with Cortinas. So we had Anglias, and then we had Cortina A body, and then Cortina B body. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we won. At the same time we were preparing those cars for the Winter Rally, we were also preparing cars for the Shell 4000 Rally. And that was really interesting. And so in the midst of all of this, we now have Comstock Racing Team is now racing. They're now rallying in major events. Then they asked me to put together some private entries. So they would be sold, they would acquire cars, and we would help them with what they should do to make them competitive and give them advice and that sort of stuff. And so the owners would come down on weekends and have a little seminar about how to do this, how to do that, how to do the other thing. So that worked out really, really well. And then we would do the Winter Rally, and sometimes we'd get fresh cars, depending on how hard they were beaten up during the rally. But anyway, we were winning, and when you were winning, there wasn't much discussion about money.
Right.
Okay. When I said we need to need vehicles to cart these cars around. I had ended up with 2 tractor trailers and an open one and a closed one, and then we built a shop in the front of the closed one, and it was the first of its kind. And no, as a matter of fact, it was one of the only ones in North America at the time.
Right, a full race trailer like today.
Fledged race trailer. So Comstock was actually more than. It appeared to be more than it actually was, but it was winning.
Right.
And you know what? That's a good combination. So, but in the winter time, I would also go to the universities around Ontario, and I would speak to the graduating engineers and speak to them about the development of the Mustangs and how it was done from an engineering point of view. And the one cute story that I told them, I said, is there anybody in here that doesn't like Mustangs? There wasn't a hand went up. I said, is there anybody here that doesn't like 2-seater front seats in Mustangs? I said, did you ever notice that all the Mustangs were bench seats? You ever wonder why? Well, if you do the market research, as Ford did, and they looked at who was buying these cars, they're in an age group that a lot of people were just beginning to understand life. And so bucket seats didn't fit that scenario, but the bench seat did. That's why, a simple reason, that's why Mustangs always had bench seats.
Really? That's comical.
It is. And so there were a lot of things to do in Comstock. And I'm jumping around a little bit, but one of the things, Ford wanted to win Le Mans, and so they selected various teams to work on the development of certain components. I became involved in the development of disc brakes, and I did that with a company called Kelsey Hayes. And nobody knew our racing Mustangs all had Galaxy calipers. But you know, you ever want people, because I knew what fit, because I knew the car, and the engineer assigned to us from Kelsey Hayes knew what would work and what wouldn't work. Okay, so it was good to put, because the Galaxy had 4 pucks, and they were large. Okay, and so you could put a lot of pad on, and so it just worked out really, really well. That's why we were able to do a lot of races without having to replace stuff, and so it was all that stuff worked out well. And
so let me interrupt you here. When did so you guys started with the Cobras, then it went to the Mustangs, right? And you guys ordered an R model from Shelby American?
Here's what happens. We had Mustangs in the Shell 4000 Rally, and one of them was a 6-cylinder car. A 6-cylinder Mustang was a 260-inch car. And a lot of the Mustangs in those days were 260 cubic inches. And they then put their 6-cylinder in it. So when we did the Shell 4000, we got the engines built by a company called Dearborn Steel Tubing. And back in the day, Dearborn Steel Tubing did a lot of special racing work for Ford Motor Company. So they they were really good at helping us with some stuff, and the engine, the 6-cylinder engine was more powerful than the 260. It's amazing. When they breathed on that 6-cylinder, it became more. It was quite interesting to hear when it sounded when you started up. But anyhow, Epi drove that car, and during the course of the Shell 4000, you're not allowed to replace any components. The gearbox. We decided to change the oil on the transmission in British Columbia. We decided it was easier to take the transmission out with the oil in it and put it back with fresh oil.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
And so we did that. We changed where we were at an overnight stop, and we arranged for the car to go to a garage the next morning when they left Parc Ferme, and we were waiting there with everything laid out, and we changed that transmission in something like 27 minutes. We got everything done. And off it goes. Now, problem was, it was my fault. We got halfway to the end of the rally, and the transmission broke again. And when I got there, I found out why. In the replacement transmission they had plastic plugs in everywhere. See, and I never changed the drain plug, so the plastic plug was still in the transmission, and we never put the proper metal one in there, and that's why it melted.
Right.
Came out, so that was my fault. So you learn things. But anyway, what happened with that car is the rear chassis bent. And if you think of the hoop over the rear axle, everything past center line dropped down about a quarter inch.
Okay.
So when we got the car back, I saw that and I said to Ford, and so Ford said, well, just get rid of the car, just scrap it. So I said, well, can I make a race car out of it? And they said, no, we don't race Mustangs. So that's why I said, oh, okay. So that's why I started building the first Mustang that ever raced.
Out of that car?
Out of that 6-cylinder car. And that's, so I got the whole pack, I got the whole 289 engine, Weber carburetors, that whole package. I got the T6 transmission with the aluminum box and the tail shaft and all that, and then I got the rear axle, and it was a beautiful car, beautiful car. And it was scheduled to run at Montreal, and then Ford came and said we want it in the CNE show first. Oh, okay, Canadian National Exhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So they said, we're building a stand, we're going to put the car up in the stand, and we're going to feature it. And I said, well, just a minute now. We built this as a race car, not a show car. So I said, well, I'll work with you on it, but you can have it. I need to take it out of there on the Wednesday. And anyway, so I have to go test it, and I have to take it to Montreal. We have to be able to test it. So I got to test it Thursday and be in Montreal, be in Tremblant on Friday afternoon. Anyway, so I never tested the car. I just built it at the shop and took it down to the CNE, put it up in the stand. So on a Wednesday, we took it down in the morning, took it out to motorsports, and testing it for the first time, and I do 10 laps or so, and then come in, tighten everything, and check everything over, and blah, 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 and then go a little quicker, blah, blah, blah. Then I decide, well, I'm going to give it. So went up the back straight pretty quickly, and, you're dealing with almost 400 horsepower with a pretty lightweight car. That's...
You're hauling the mail.
Yeah, you're hauling mail. And so, anyway, I come up over the top of the hill then at Mosport. And this was before they took the top off.
The real top of the hill.
The real top of the hill. And all of a sudden, everything went black. And I thought, expletive deleted. And what had happened is when we put the car into the show, I left the headliner in it, so because people were looking up. So it was on stand, so they could see inside the car. And so a bare, naked roof is not very attractive. So I left the headliner in the car.
Sure.
Okay. And as soon as I got out, and I had the windows open in the car, and got up to the top of the hill, and the headliners came down. And the bows on the headliners came down, and then the headliner came down over the top of my
right over your eyes.
right over my helmet. And I just crested the top of the hill, and the car was coming down, and I said, "Okay, what are you going to do, Paul?" And I just remembered the corner.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I just remembered the corner. So I braked as hard as I could and turned the wheel a little bit, and then I can hear the gravel.
Yeah. So you're off the track.
Off the track now, and then the car stops. I'm about a foot from the tire barrier.
Holy cow.
So I pull this headliner down, put the car in reverse, and go in the pit. But it could have been a. But anyway, then.
Par with like a steering wheel coming off or something like that.
Well, you can imagine from your own driving activities, of all of a sudden you can't see anything. In the wintertime, they would call it a whiteout. In the summertime, they'd call it a blackout. But it was a very interesting situation as a driver. And
that's a good story.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It was scary, but it was kind of interesting.
You created or fabbed up the first Mustang race car because Ford wasn't racing Mustangs at the time.
Alan Mann was playing with rally cars over in Europe, and he tried to pawn them off as race cars, but then Detroit said, but they couldn't win anything. And Detroit said, no, we're not going to race domestic product. Okay. So I went down to see Jack Still, and Jack says, I can't do anything about it.
How did you guys, like, in my mind, the famous Comstock R model, when did that happen?
The R was on order, and halfway through the year the car got delivered. Okay. So that's why I ended up driving the Mustang, because Epi was driving the 350R, right. And I drove the Mustang, first of all, to make sure it was working properly, and then to be able to talk to people like Craig Fisher, who drove for us. This is how you drive this car. I'm not telling you how to drive, but I'm telling you this is what this car likes and this is what it doesn't like. So that shortened the path to success. So Craig was pretty good at that, and so that worked out really, really well. But the first race in Quebec, we won it. I won that. That was on the short circuit before the long circuit was made, and I was able to take the vice president of Ford around in Quebec. Then 2 weeks later, I took the president of Ford around motorsports, and they're hanging on to the checkered flag, and you couldn't pry it from their hands, and so I had to give it to them at the end.
Yeah.
So I guess if you could characterize the nature of the race team is Ford. Chuck Rathgeb was a really good man in letting us do what we needed to do. Ford was an extremely good partner in making sure we had the assets to get the job done, and the team was really, really good at presenting all this stuff in a positive way. I insisted everything be clean all the time, and that was one of the things that was wrong with Comstock initially. When I first time everything was dirty. Dirty car. What does that tell you? Okay, so but I insisted everything is clean. If you want to abide by that, you're welcome. If you don't, then I'm sorry, you're not welcome here. So that worked out. Everything had to be clean all the time, and so it was a really, really good package. And when Ford decided to get out of it, internationally we stayed on for another 2 years.
But let me go to the GT40s, because you guys were sent. You bought GT40s. You were sent road cars as well as like PR cars. I hear stories of you ripping around the 401 in a PR car from London to Montreal in 3 hours, stuff like that. What was the deal with the GT40s? Because that was, to me, the pinnacle of Ford's racing effort.
Okay. In order to comply with the rules and regulations of the FIA, to be in a class, you had to build 50 cars. That
homologation.
Yeah, for homologation purposes. We at Comstock wanted 2 cars, race cars. Now, I went over to England when they were being built at Ford Advanced Vehicles. And the man that ran Ford Advanced Vehicles, his name was John Wire. And John and I got along really, really well. One of the reasons was that his wife was from Calgary.
Okay.
So he invited me to stay at his home when I was over there. And of course, his wife wanted to talk about Canada, wanted to talk about Calgary, wanted to talk about anything Canadian, okay? And so the old story, happy wife, happy life, fitted with John. So Comstock could get pretty much what they wanted, okay? So somehow I ended up with 4 cars. I ended up with 2 race cars. Then I ended up with a silver road car. And I ended up with a brown road car. The brown road car was given to me to use as my daily driver.
It's quite the daily driver.
Yeah, and so they said you're out and about, you're well known, and you go to car clubs and you talk about our activity, blah blah blah. So you take that car and use it as your road car. The silver car, I managed that in terms of where it went and how it got there, and blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of stories about that. But I can trash those stories because I can show you pictures of the silver car when I was delivering it to where it was going to be used for, whatever it was going to be used for.
Right.
And then I would be there and I would say, no. You don't do that. You do this. And if you don't like it, then we'll call this off. So I run the car, you don't. So then they said, well, whenever the car is being driven, it has to be driven by a union driver. And I said, well, in that case, you're not getting the car.
A union driver? Like a Ford?
Oh, no. You had to be, if there were... It was presented to me that driving a car in a movie was a union job. So driving a car in commercials was then deemed to be the equivalent of driving a car in a movie, and so you had to have a union driver.
I see.
I can tell you a separate story about running a Formula Series at Toronto Indy Track when they decided that the cars had to be driven by union drivers, and in fact they did, and made a mess of everything. But that's another story. Anyhow, so I simply said to the people that were doing the work, we're not going to invest in these cars and have someone come in and doesn't know what they're doing. And that's just not going to happen. So if we need to call the lawyers, we'll call the lawyers. I mean, that's okay. So that never ended up being a problem. But that meant that we could use our own people. That's why you saw in some of the commercials, you saw really nice-looking guys with nice-looking chicks doing this stuff. Okay, and I enjoyed helping out with that stuff. I got a kick out of it. So that stuff was a lot of fun. But yes, we did do a chap by the name of Don Newlands, who was a photojournalist for Toronto Star, was a friend of mine. And I also had a friend who came up to Comstock all the time that ran a jewelry company. And he had a jewelry store at Avenue Road and Bay Street. Nothing I could afford. But anyway, he was a friendly guy, and we became a little more than acquaintances, but not really friends. So it just worked out nicely for us to be friendly. Anyway, he said to me, I have a friend in Montreal that owns a restaurant. Is there any possibility that you could bring the GT40? Is there any possibility that I could take the GT40 to Montreal? I said, no, there's no possibility whatsoever. He said, well, but is there any way to do it? So, make a long story short, Don Newlands and I took the car, and I think we got to Montreal under 4 hours.
That's pretty quick.
Pretty quick. Now they had prepared downtown on Crescent Street. The restaurant was there. They'd prepared a ramp. Okay, GT40. For the GT40. So we got there, and it came up, and they had taken 2 or 3 tables away, and they put the car in there. Anyway, it was an auto orgasm. That whole evening was just people fell in love with the GT40, and I had to go start it once an hour. And, right. And so but the DJ would say, okay, the next sound of the GT40 will be at such and such a time. And we had a lot of fun.
That's great. So you drove it just for dinner in Montreal?
Montreal, yeah.
And I think like people who haven't been around or put their hands on one of those street cars, they were just a race car.
It was a race car with turn signals, if you want to. But remember, some of them were things. A few things were done a little differently, and depending on what the end use of the car was going to be. But that's why John Wire was able to manipulate stuff over in the factory, and it was pretty interesting. But I enjoyed having the car. And I enjoyed driving it around, and I would go to a meeting in Detroit. I'd take the GT40. Okay.
You've probably put more miles on a GT40 than a lot of people, at least on the street.
Oh, absolutely.
Maybe than anyone.
Yeah. I'd go back and forth to Detroit, and it was. I never exceeded the speed limit. Of course, I'm telling you. Of course, I know. And. The car was completely comfortable. it was pure pleasure to drive it. And if you're, all of a sudden you realize that you're a motorhead and you never knew it. Okay, so a car like that awakens parts of your brain that you never knew you had in terms of thinking about cars and thinking about driving. But if you all of a sudden decide that you want to take that car up through the gears of the ZF transmission, be prepared, because that puppy would just move along really, really well. And also, if you wanted to stop, it would stop. And so it was delightful to do that. Now, the brown car didn't have air conditioning, so it was pretty hot in there. And the race car had better ventilation for that. But it was just a whole world of here's this guy that was brought up in downtown Toronto. I lived on Asquith Avenue, that was Bay and Bloor. Okay. And I grew up selling papers, and they were 3 cents each at the time, and I had my own paper route and all that sort of stuff. And I would deliver flowers on the weekend, and I made use of the bicycle I had to deliver flowers, to deliver meat, to deliver whatever you want, and earn money and do some things. And all of a sudden you find yourself sitting in a car in a GT40 in London, Ontario, headed home from a meeting in Detroit. It's a whole other world. Mm-hmm. Just a whole other world. And I really enjoyed it. And then the brown car, we took it with us. We had 2 open trailers when we traveled across Canada, and I didn't want to take the big tractor trailers, so we had 2 open cars. We had good coverage for the cars, and so we would go and put on a demonstration at the same time. Okay. We raced, and I would take people out in the brown car, and Epi would, of course, look after the white car, the race car. And then I had a contest in Westwood with Roger Ward in an Indy car, and it was touted as the Indy car versus the sports car. Okay. And so they're going to do this 5 or 10 lap race on Saturday and want to get on Sunday. So Roger Ward was a pretty sharp guy. I didn't know what this was going to turn out to be, so I was really, really cautious about it. Anyway, he got in front of me on Saturday, and then all of a sudden I'm getting a face full of methanol exhaust.
Right.
And boy, oh boy, if you want to cry quickly, just get methanol in your eye.
Yeah, it'll empty your face out.
Oh, and he knew it, right? Yeah. He knew it. So he stayed, and I had to really back off to get on Sunday. Different deal, because I put all the effort into getting it off the line, and so I got in front of him, and I could down there lap him with the GT40, but we had to make a show out of it. So, yeah. But he was a good
GT40 versus IndyCar.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At Westwood.
Cool.
And the other kind of interesting things with Mustangs. The year we won, we ran Anglias and we ran Mustangs, and we won. And on Sunday, we decided, and we finished the race, the rally on Thursday, and then we decided that I would race the car at Westwood on Saturday and Sunday. The highly touted Mustang community out in Westwood were just laughing at the rally car. Okay. So I had a friend, and I borrowed a set of wheels and old wheels and tires from him, and then the gearing was pretty good, So anyway, I just kind of took it easy in practice and qualifying. So I think I qualified fourth because that's what I wanted to do. And the press was saying, look at all these specialized race cars, and yet Ford brings this car that just did 4,287 miles or kilometers, whatever miles, and it's out there, and they haven't done anything to it, and it's competing against these special built race cars. So anyway, it was interesting because on the Sunday on the race, I got up to second, and they were bound and determined I was not going to. I could have won the race, except if someone pushes you off, there's nothing you can do about it. So the car went off, and I just left it there. But it was kind of fun to take the rally car that had run 4,200 miles and take it on a road race immediately. And the Anglia that had won was driven by Henry Taylor. In that race, on the Sunday he finished 7th, I think, with the Anglia around Westwood. And Henry Taylor was the president of Ford Racing in England. Wow. But he was the Formula One driver.
Really? Yeah. Okay.
And what he did after his Formula One career, he took on the job as competitions manager for Ford of England. When I went over there, Ford had the compound at the airport.
Right.
And that's where they kept cars for people coming and going, and they had an office there with an individual that would check you out and check you in. Okay. Would have the keys, so I made a reservation for a car, and so I get over there on. How did I get over there? I think I got over there at night, so I took a day flight. I think you could fly during the day or you could fly during the night, I think, 'cause I was over there all the time. And anyway, I get over there, so I go to the booth and I get the keys to this car, and I go to get the car and look at the license plate. It's Cortina. Okay. So looks funny. Car looks funny. So I get in the car, I got the keys started. I shut it off immediately. There's something wrong with this car. So I popped the hood and had a look, and they'd put a Formula One engine in
it. Holy cow!
So anyway,
sounds pretty. You fired it up and drove it after that, I'm sure.
Yeah, I had to take it. I had to take it to the Ford Competitions Department, which was at an airport east of London. And but I had to drive through London to get there. But I was surprised how docile it was. But was it noisy? It was really noisy.
I bet it was.
It would fly.
I bet.
It would just fly. So
that's great. So Comstock racing comes to an end. For you or in general?
Period.
Yeah. They're done racing.
They're done racing.
And now you're hooked. You are in the motorsports industry for life. You're going to continue to do something in racing.
George Eaton hired me.
Right. And who's George Eaton?
George Eaton's family owned the T. Eaton Company Limited at the time, the biggest general merchandise operation in Canada. 50,000 employees across Canada. They had a whack of stores, and anyhow, so he hired me.
And he had a race team.
And before that, at Comstock, I had prepared a car for him, which was the Alpine that Epi and I had used, when we were finished with that, George Eaton bought it. And so he campaigned that, and he kept it at Comstock. We looked after it for him. And at the same time, the second year, we ordered a 427 Cobra for him. And we got that, and that was a pretty interesting car.
I bet.
That was the Holman and Moody 427. Okay, so it got the job done, but it got the job done very easily. So George was very successful in it, and he won. The car never missed a beat all year. Then I went to work for him when Comstock shut down, and I ordered a Mark III McLaren for him, and went over to England and finished that and brought it back.
And that was to race Can-Am.
That was to race Can-Am, and I put in a Gurney Westlake engine.
That's a real race car.
Oh yeah, and I had gone over to England to Westlake's, and there were some problems, and all my experience with small engines, I could see what some of the problems were. So I worked with Harry Westlake and said, instead of doing this, why don't you take a look at doing this? He said, well, that's really interesting. And I said, yeah. And I said, blah, 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 blah. So I was helpful to him, and so he was helpful to me. Okay. And so we got the engine to work. Gurney couldn't get it to work. After we got the engine working, Gurney went ahead with it. Right. And so it was really a lot of fun, that engine. That's the engine we took to Mexico. And when we were going to Mexico with that car...
so there was a Can-Am race in Mexico?
Yeah.
And what year was this, roughly? Late 60s or early 70s?
70s. Right. Okay. Yeah. Anyhow, I went to the University of Toronto engineering department, and I said, I'm going to give you guys a problem. And you figure it out. I said, we're going to take this engine. And I said, yeah, I'll lend you the engine. And it's got these Weber carburetors. And I want you to tell me what chokes I should be using and what jets I should be using. Right. Because we're going to go from sea level to 7,200 feet. Right. So when we got to Mexico, and George gets in the car, we were right up there in the top 6, and no one could understand why. But we just got the engine breathing at 7,000 feet.
And those Webers are notoriously tough to tune.
Oh yeah, and so I had a. By that time, I knew a lot about Webers, because we had them all over the place. Right. We had them, and we had the Webers, and we had Webers in the Alpine, Sunbeam Alpine. We had put Webers on that. We had Webers on pretty much all the race cars I ever had anything to do with, because that was the way to go, because you could tune them, but you had to know how. Right. And there was a lot of stuff available from Weber to help you do that if you opened your eyes, okay? Open your ears. And they were very helpful. And so that was pretty good. And plus the guys down at Shelby guys were really helpful on Weber stuff. So that was... Yeah, that was really good. Nobody could figure out why we were so fast in Mexico.
And so George was the team owner and the driver. Yeah. So he was a gentleman racer, but he took it very seriously, and he had unlimited funding.
Yeah, well, there was no budget, and because it was a lot of money for a race team. It wasn't a lot of money for Eaton's, but George is still with us. So there's a couple of stories that I just better leave alone. But George is I like George. He's a good man. But one of the funny ones was he had a girlfriend that was, she could be on the front page of Vogue. She was extraordinarily beautiful. and she was Swedish and had that Swedish blonde hair. She lived in North Toronto, not too far from where I lived. Anyway, we were going to go to Elkhart Lake, and George came to me and he said, I want you to do something for me. I said, okay. He said, I have to take you to meet my girlfriend's parents, and you're going to tell them that you're going to chaperone us at Elkhart Lake. Okay. And I said, okay. So we went to dinner at her parents' house, and the whole family was really attractive people. I mean, and anyway, I said I would be the chaperone, and they said okay. So now I've made a commitment to them, and we get to Elkhart Lake, and so we're checking in, and I said, George, it's 2 rooms. And he said, well, why? And I said, because I'm chaperoning you. And so the whole weekend we had a lot of fun with that. And I said, I'm going to come to that second room during the night and make sure that you're not in it. Okay. So we just had some fun that way, and it was good. So George was a good guy, but then we got the McLaren 12, Mark 12, which was a car that McLaren's never raced. It was a for sale car by Trojan Cars, and it is a pig, terrible car, and it was overheating. And anyhow, we decided to take the car. George wanted to take the car to Montreal because his uncle was president of United Technologies, and they're the people that supplied the turbine engine for Andretti at Indy.
Yeah.
Okay, and so help me God, you could pick that engine up with one hand.
Wow.
Just pick it up with one hand. And so we decided, when we went to Montreal, he decided to take it. We'd go down and see what it's like. So we'd go down to St. Lawrence, and they had a boat that had one of these turbines in it. And so they brought in their boat captain, and so here we are in this little boat with one of these little engines in there. It'd fly. Oh my gosh! But anyway, they came and did some studies at Motorsport on how to cool the car, and they worked actually. They know about that stuff, so that works out. But then George wanted to go to England. He wanted to go to Europe to race, and wanted me to go with him. And I said, no, I don't want to go to Europe.
Why?
I don't want to go to Europe because we can't win. And my success as an individual is based on winning, not on competing. So with all due respect, George, I'm not going to do it. He said, well, in that case, I'll have to fire you. And I said, well, so be it. So he said, the next morning he came and with the lawyer, and he fired me. Okay, a bit extreme. He says, okay. Anyhow, 2 days later, I did a deal with Roger McCaig. And the McCaig brothers had the Tramac Transportation.
What was it?
Tramac Transportation.
Yep. And what was that company?
The largest bulk hauler in Canada.
So there's a theme here where you're working for guys with no budget.
Yeah, but
That's how you
did I have a formula? Yeah, because when at Comstock, the McCaig brothers were out in Regina. They they bought a Lotus 23 and another similar car. What was it? I forget who made it. Anyway, they couldn't get them to work, so during one of the events at Mosport, they brought the car down, and Ford said to me, "This is look after this fellow because he's a big fleet buyer." Mm. So he brought the car in, and I said, "Okay, well, let's have a look at it." So take the body off, and as soon as he took the body off, and I just eyeballed the car, and I said, "Well, okay, I'll give you a list of things to do." And anyway, we gave him a bit of a hand to do a couple of things. He took the car out to Motorsport, and he said it's never worked as well as that. And all I did, frankly, was straighten all the wheels and get
Well, that helps.
pointing in the same direction and get the right height of the shocks set properly and get the air pressure set properly and balance the tires of all things.
Well, that helps as well.
And so then it was really good. So that go fast forward to me not having a job with George, and I knew that was going to happen, so I'd already been talking to McKeag, who was running Can-Am cars at the time. So I took over his program.
Now, I want to jump back because I glossed over it, and there's a significant story when you guys are running the GT40s in '66. There's a big wreck at Sebring. Like a pretty major crash. Yeah. And, you see pictures online, like it's bad. Can you tell the story from that weekend?
Absolutely. Because people said that Ford was masking what happened at Sebring. But here's what happened at Sebring. Running at Sebring is like running 6 2-hour races, and you just set it up to do it, and you have the people, and you have the parts, and you have the tooling, and there's special tooling for running those races, and special devices to get the knockoffs off, and special devices to get the calipers back in so you can put new pads in, and how to do that at night, and how to do that when it's really, really hot. And you kind of, if you know your craft, you can work those things out. Plus, we had the resources of Shelby to be able to talk to them about how do you do this, how do you do that, how do you do the other thing. So John Wire provided a man to come and help us, and he was really, really, really helpful. So we were prepared to do all this. So I forget when we're in about somewhere around the 4th hour, and Epi had come in, who was driving with Epi? Anyway, Epi's co-driver brought the car in, and we put new tires on it and filled it with fuel, and Epi took off. Followed not too long afterwards by Bob McLean coming in to get brakes. So that would be 4 hours later. Anyway, McLean came into the pit. We jacked the car up. We put new pads in. We got the pads back to the rotors and got everything working. New tires, everything's fine. Fuel, and Bob takes off. And if you know Sebring, it's quite a long way to turn 1. Anyway, as Bob is going down the pit lane and he just gets to the end of the pit wall, Epi goes by on Bob's left, so Bob can see him. So we had said to the drivers, when we do a tire change and we do brake change, take 2 laps to get things working. Like, just back off by 10% or so. Get everything set before you put the hammer down. Anyway, Bob took off right away to chase Epi, and gets to turn 2, loses control, goes sliding across the grass, hits a utility pole which is there. On the right-hand side, the bladder is full of fuel. The bladder bursts out the front and catches on fire. The car burns, and Bob dies. Now, there's a picture of the front nose. They say the wheel came off, because you see the wheel going through. Well, in the front of the GT40, in the regulations for the GT40, you have to have a spare tire. It has to go in the front. And it's held down by the straps. So, and it's just an ordinary wire wheel, okay? So the wheel that people can see in the picture, they don't know about wire wheels. They don't know about solid wheels. Because the wheels we had were Halibrands, right? Mm-hmm. So they start making stories up about the wheel came off because they weren't tightened. Well, there's the wreck. It's still got four wheels on it. I mean, anyway, then that was okay. We see our way through that initially. So when we get the car stripped of all the stuff that maybe of some value, and I said, well, what are we going to do it? And we don't want to carry this hulk back to Canada. So I called Canada Customs, and Canada Customs said, if you're going to destroy it, then get a letter from the local police department explaining get them to do a letter saying what happened to it. So they were building a new overpass. So I talked to the contractor, and the contractor said, well, this is what we're doing. And the policeman was there, the sergeant was there. So I said, well, can we take this and put it in where you're rearranging all the earth around this clover leaf? And yeah, no problem at all. It won't interfere with anything. No, it won't interfere with anything. So that's what we did. We buried that part, and we brought a bunch of other stuff home with us.
You buried the chassis.
The chassis, and then a number of years later, the stories come out. Well, they found the car. Okay, bullshit. You didn't find a car. Well, we have the serial plate. Yeah, sure you do. And then everybody wanted me to tell them, you probably know this story. You can't turn around after you've had a number of successful cars without someone wanting you to verify something so that they can enhance the value of their whatever it is they want to sell. But anyway, the story of the GT40 is very simple. The car crashed. The spare wheel came off the chassis and went through the air, and that's what people saw. Why did Bob die? Bob died because he burned to death. Why did he burn to death? Because the car caught fire, because it hit a utility pole that shouldn't have been there. The fact is it was, but that was one of 2 or 3 fatalities at that event.
Right, which weren't uncommon in those days.
Uncommon, and so that was that. It really. I took it hard. It was very, very difficult for me. It set me on a path of becoming very concerned with safety. And I carried that on through the rest of my career.
If we do jump ahead a little bit, how does that jump happen for you from being involved in specific race teams to now being involved in sanctioning bodies and safeties and specific events?
Okay. What happened was we're running with Roger McKay, and one of the things on all the, because we did Daytona and Sebring with the Lola T120, and we're at Daytona, and the car was really running well. We find ourselves in third place with the 1600cc car. I mean, that was, how do you explain that? When you're passing Ferraris right, left, and center, how do you explain that? It's hard to explain. So anyway, the announcer comes along and they say, and then we have, and in third position is the Lola T210 of Roger McKay from Drinkwater, Saskatchewan. And then he says, Drinkwater, Saskatchewan? Where the hell is that? The announcer says. And then a little while later, he comes on and he says, oh, here's this Lola up front again, and now it's being driven by the co-driver, Morris McKay, from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. And whoever heard, what's a Moose Jaw? So it read Drinkwater, Saskatchewan, Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. There was a lot of fun with those names, okay, around that. And but anyhow, we were third or fourth or fifth or something like that. Anyway, the car came in and we did all the changes. Went to start, it wouldn't start. So the starter wouldn't work. And so the starter was a weak part of the car. We couldn't change it, but I had another starter sitting there. You couldn't replace the starter. But I had a starter sitting there, and I took the starter off. The starter I had sitting there was all apart. So then I took the starter off the car, which is really hot, put it up on the bench, and then took all the parts off this one, put them up here, took all the replacement parts, put them down here, reassembled it, got underneath, put it on the car. 17 minutes we changed, so we were there, but we dropped down to, I think, 11th place or something like that. But those were moments of to build a 1.7 liter car and be surrounded by Ferraris and Alfa Romeos and things like that. It was really satisfying. Anyhow, we're doing, the issue was I would pre-sell all the cars that we had.
All the race cars. Yeah.
When we order, the car we're driving now is already sold while we're driving.
Right.
And so we'll do, it'll be picked up at the end of the season. And that makes life a whole lot easier. So we got all that working fine. Anyhow, we're at Roger. Roger had developed cancer, kidneys. But I was, I knew about it. Roger knew about it, of course, and his wife knew about it. We're the only people that knew about it. So anyway, typically we would take the car to the race, and Roger would arrive, and he'd race it, blah 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 blah. And I had to talk to the doctor, and I talked to the pharmacist, and I talked to them about the pills and the pain and what he should take and when he should take it and how he should take it. So I managed I did his pain management for him while we're at the weekend. So Roger and I became really good friends. And when you're helping people like that, there's a kinsmanship that's created. So it was really good. But anyway, we're at Laguna Seca. I go out to the airport to pick up Roger. No Roger. So I call, no answer. Anyway, Roger's in the hospital having a kidney operation. So I finally I talked to him, and I said, well, we'll come home. He said, no. He said, find someone to drive the car. And so I found Chuck Parsons. And Chuck and I were friends from racing activities because he drove for Carl Haas, okay? And so Chuck drove the McLaren at the M8F at Laguna Seca, and then again at Riverside a week later, and so that was good. Then we got back to Toronto and talked to Roger, and it was time to fold. He wouldn't be able to carry on, so we folded the team, and everything was sold. And then I got a call from Roger saying, I talked to my brother, and we want you to come out for an interview because we think that the knowledge that you have about mechanical things will be an asset to our company now. So the next thing you know, I'm working for Trimac Transportation, and I've got 1,500 tractors and 4,500 trailers to look after, and something like 150 locations in North America. So anyway, so that worked out well. So now that's where we did set a budget. So so that's when I was now back to my professional career, which is where I essentially started many years ago. Right. So I'm back now earning a living, okay? Because you don't make very much money in racing when you're. I knew that, but it was a fun life. So that's how, and because the way it was explained to the company, if what Paul does is good enough for Formula One, then it's good enough for us. Right. So that's how it got sold. So there wasn't. So we met.
I guess we glossed over that. What was the Formula One effort?
An interesting word you used, effort, yeah, and I was alongside Epi when he raced the Lotus. Okay. And I was not a big fan of Colin Chapman's at any point in time, but that's another story. At a point in time, I'm back in normal business. I'm now a suitor, okay, and anyway, I got a call from Ford. Chuck wants to run a Formula One car. Labatt's is willing to support it, but Chuck will only do it if you're involved. So anyway, I took 3 weeks off work and went to the airport and picked up a car that had been rented from Bernie Ecclestone. And now I knew Bernie from Formula One days, okay. Anyhow, we get the car to Epi's garage, and we got the body off, and so I start to jack up the back of the car from a pad underneath the transmission, and the back of the car starts to come up, but the front of the car doesn't move. I said, that's strange. So I let it down again, and I looked and I jack it up again. Son of a gun, the engine is twisted in the rear bulkhead. Making a long story short, I had to take everything out, and the rear bulkhead was completely gone.
And this was Ecclestone's car.
And this is what he was famous for, okay. So I said, well, we essentially made a new rear bulkhead.
And this was for the Canadian Grand Prix?
Yeah. It's that red and white car. Yeah, the pictures right here. Yeah. And anyhow, the car became it was the car that Ecclestone rented to everybody, and it never ran because if it ran, it might get hurt or it might wear out. Well, it was all worn out anyway. But if you rented it, it was as is where is, and if something broke, that's too bad. So that's the way. So he had a lot of money coming in, but very little money going out. But anyway, I told Bernie the first time I met Bernie, I bought a car from him. He was operating out of his trailer beside a little garage that was rented. You know, it's one of those inline places, and so he had an office in a small trailer with the water lines hooked up to the. Anyway, that was funny to meet him there. Anyhow, I told him, "Oh, we've done we made a new rear bulkhead for you, and now we got an engine problem." And so he said, "I'll send you another engine." So he did. But what the problem was is that car, the transmission wasn't very good, and there were no parts for it because it was a bastard transmission, and he didn't have parts for it. So that's what happened to the car. It broke, the transmission, and we didn't go anywhere with it. But Ford got everything they wanted out of it. Why? Because we put on a good front with the car, and it was at one stage of the game, it was the best looking Formula One car of the year. That's the designation it got. Okay. And do you remember the red and white car?
I know which car you're talking
about. Yeah, and they even made a model out of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So it was that was good. It was fun to be part of that.
Yeah.
So that was that. So that was the last competitive thing that I had.
Right. So then fast forward to I want to jump to that, you're being involved in the sanctioning body stuff, the safety stuff, every open wheel race in Canada you're attending and there and running and how did that transition happen?
Well, it was because I would usually for the events that I went to, I would usually tie it to some training session to one of the Trimac regions or something like that, and then I would get a whole bunch of people to come to the race, okay, and have them looked after, okay, and so that made it all doable. Because there's no loser in a pillow fight. So it was just everybody enjoyed that, and it was all good talk. And then when one of the divisions of the company was being offered for sale, I said, "Well, I'll bring the guy. I'll introduce him to Roger Penske." And so I took him and introduced him to Roger Penske, and eventually sold that company to Roger. But there were just the moral of the story is do it right and do it once, and avoid pissing people off, and don't take off more than you can chew, and just get the job done. And by the way, one of the reasons I ended up driving the Mustang was we couldn't trust anybody to win with it, because there were a lot of people who could drive it on Sunday, but they couldn't win with it. So you, in your career as a driver, you've seen, I'm sure, situations where you had a beautiful car with a not so beautiful driver, and they tend to wear cars out pretty quickly. So you kind of watch all that stuff and keep everything clean and present everything forward, and just make it as enjoyable as possible. And it works. And being part of the administration of motorsport was an extension of having been a professional in that industry. And if you look today at the motorsport industry in Canada, and you do an economic appraisal of it, it is a huge industry. Motorsport is a huge, huge industry. And the industry is never recognized by the government of Canada.
Right.
As far as the government is concerned, it doesn't exist.
Right.
Even though the politicians are the first ones to be there to get it right around the racetrack. In Montreal, as the clerk of the course, I had always had, the special cars, whatever they were. And as a clerk of the course, you get
Gilles Villeneuve track, the F1 track, yeah.
You always get the latest, greatest, whatever's going on.
Yep.
So I would also take people around the racetrack, and the Premier of Canada, for example, whatever politician, you have to get clearance to do that. And a couple of funny things we had in Montreal. We had trying to remember the Premier, Jean Chrétien was the Prime Minister. Yeah. And Bourassa was there as well. So where I was charged with taking these people around the racetrack. So I'm sitting in the car with Chrétien because we were waiting for something to go out on the racetrack. And so I said to him, well, good afternoon. I'm Paul from Oakville. And he said, well, I'm Jean from wherever he was in Quebec. And so we sat and chatted for a while. And he said, when we go out, he said, is there any possibility that the car behind us cannot pass us? Because here, of course, is Bourassa, is not a big fan of Chrétien at the time, so I made sure that he didn't do that. But in the course of doing that, at the end of the third lap, we were only supposed to do two. At the end of the third lap, came into the pit and the brakes were on fire. And I managed to get it woed coming down the fast lane to the point where I stopped, and I had told him the brakes were on fire, so I'll go down to the end and get away from everything, but make sure we got some firepower down there. And he said, well, we've got two of you now. Bourassa's car was on fire as well. So anyway, there's all kinds of things happen when you're involved, and fortunately most of them are positive.
Yeah. Because my first introduction to you was you were what was the title of ASN FIA Canada in karting? You were at every single run.
Karting director, yeah.
And that was, you were done being how did you put it, a suitor, and now you're back into racing, simply for the love of it. Yeah. And you're at every single go-kart race, every major Canadian national championship, every major event, and I guess you were kind of where the buck stopped for enforcement, right, for the FIA?
Sometimes, yeah. It depends on what the issue would be. Mm-hmm. But yeah, right. Sometimes. And most of that, there were a lot of things like, can you do this, or not do this, and can you run this class or not run this class? And you have the promoters there's always someone wanting to be a promoter that wants to do something that no one has done before because it doesn't suit Canada. Like there's all kinds of classes of cars that you could run. There were people that I remember the old IndyCar spec cars were bought by someone in Toronto, and so he bought 12 old spec Indy cars and wanted to run them in a series. And we said no, you can't, because you can't take anybody and stick them in a 500 horsepower car that weighs 2,000 pounds, and they won't know what to do with it. So you just can't unleash that, and so we didn't allow it. So the individual in question had to find some other customers. He had to resell them, and so there were things like that you have to watch out for, but in that case, you'd always stay behind the scene. You don't want to be the lead. You want to stay behind the scene, because as a regulator, you're not actually in that business. Someone else is in that business, so you have to let them do what they within the confines of the regulations. They're free to do whatever they want to do as long as it fits the regulations. So it's an interesting sport. There's a new ASN in place now, and time will tell how all that works out. It takes time to become established, no matter what you're doing. So we'll just see how that goes down the road.
And I guess another current question, the hot question right now for licensing, is all these North American drivers and American drivers and even some Canadian guys there, are winning IndyCar races. And maybe they could go race Formula One, but they don't have a super license. What's your take on that?
Okay. Drivers in Formula One have to have super license. If you're going to be the race director for a Formula One race, you have to have a super license as a race director. Or if you're going to be a steward in Formula One, you have to have a super license. So I was a holder of 2 super licenses, one for race director and one for international steward. Okay. In order to hold that, you have to pass certain criteria. You either do or you don't. Some issues in terms of rite of passage are worth more than others, depending on what the subject is. Anyhow, if you kind of take a look at there was a problem years ago of unqualified people getting into high-powered cars because of their bank account success, as opposed to their driving prowess. And that was particularly evident across a lot of classes. So the current situation has been developed over a few years, and I think it's pretty successful now, that to be a Formula One driver, you have to have 40 points. And that's it, no matter what, you have 40 points, because now you've got some clear criteria. Now, how do you assemble those points? You can assemble them in different classes. That class has a maximum amount of points. This class has a maximum amount of points. This class has a maximum amount of points. So to get to be Formula One, you have to have 40 points. So right now, there's, as we speak today, in November of 2022, there's 3 or 4 drivers that are trying to get enough points to get into Formula One because there's seats available. Herta, for example, in the colony, he's trying to get if he can get the points to get his license, he's got a seat. So you're going to see more of that now, but they have to go out and earn the license, not buy it. And I think that if you look now.
But I mean, I guess the pushback would be, someone saying IndyCar is enough to earn a Formula One license. Would you say, no, there's something different about going and racing in Europe, going and racing these tracks, going and racing Formula 2, Formula 3, whatever it may be?
Having done a number of IndyCar events over my career, and having done a number of Formula One events, the process of being a driver is harder in Formula One than it is in IndyCar. For example, wet weather racing. There's not much of that done in IndyCar. On an oval, none.
Yeah, oval, none.
So 1/3 of your events are run on ovals. There's not a lot of applicability of oval racing to Formula One. Mm-hmm. I've run a car on an oval for some just out of curiosity laps, okay, and I had the opportunity to do that in a Formula Atlantic car. It's quite different, but once you get settled in the groove of of an oval, you just keep kind of doing that. The difficulty in an oval comes with speed. The faster you go, the harder it gets. So, nothing to take away from anybody driving an Indy car. Imagine driving an Indy car around Indianapolis at 224 miles an hour average is like driving 224 miles an hour period in a straight line is pretty interesting. I was at Indy when Danny Sullivan did his spin and win. It's one of the most remarkable things I've ever seen in my life, but then we've also seen the ultimate penalty being paid with people in ovals when they lose control. Mm-hmm. So dangerous, yes, and that's where the excitement comes. I think that each class of racing has its own characteristics. I don't know whether it's easier to drive a Formula One car or whether it's easier to drive an Indy car, mm-hmm. just on the basis of the car itself.
Sure.
I don't know that. And in fact, there aren't very many people would know that of Fernando Alonso. He would know that because he's done both. But who else? Mm-hmm. There's just a few drivers have done.
The guys, yeah.
A few of them have done Indy 500, but Alonso seemed to settle into the Indy 500 pretty quickly. But if you remember Villeneuve and the issues he had with ovals, mm-hmm. of which he had a number, right. But he got through all that and became world champion, and he became an Indy champion, became a world champion. So it just depends on the skill levels, but. Mm-hmm. Formula One cars, if you look at they used to scare me until they put the aero stuff on the cockpit. And that's now, it's just so much better now to see those incidents happen.
Yeah.
And to see the driver now.
A prime example is looking at that Grosjean crash.
Yes. And now, of course, the Halo is going to go through another development in the next 2 years, and it'll become even better. IRL have the Halo, but they also have a windscreen on it.
Yeah.
I don't know how good that is in terms of it can get dirty, and maybe the tear off is the way to go with that. And although I think we're going to see the tear offs in Formula One become a problem, there's so many of them sucked in.
Yeah, for sure.
Now they're going to have to put them into a container that's inside the car, which they used to do a few years ago.
Really? Yeah. I didn't know that.
Yeah. You could take the tear off had to go in. They had a container in the car, had to go in there.
That's kind of funny.
So you started out with 20. I mean, it's amazing how many. I don't know how they see through them.
Well, we learned on the dirt this year.
Oh, did you? Tell me.
Well, you got to get better at it. I mean, not so much in the Pinty's cars. So we did the first Pinty's race on dirt at Oshwegan, and it was fine because we had the windshield. But actually, my first ever dirt race, I was 15, and got all these tear-offs on, and go out there for the first lap, and it's like riding a bucking Bronco. It's like nothing I've ever done before. This is motocross. This isn't racing a car. And I'm, panicking, and I'm dirt all over my visor, and I just grab accidentally not one but all 15 of them. And then after that, I'm wiping my visor, and so I find it funny that they have to gingerly take one off, fold it up, put it in a disposable bin.
Yeah, and that's what they do with sharps in the medical community.
Right.
So it's these things are improving, and I think I can't get over the Wickens accident. I just play that one back, and I just can't get rid of it in my mind. And that was just frightening, so frightening. That was a safety device put in there to protect the crowd, but it didn't do much for the driver. But I think about that a lot. So we'll see. I think we're going to see improvements down the road and in all those areas, and then they have to improve. Once you know what the problem is, you're duty bound to respond to it.
Yeah.
So, but if you look at all the things in the Pinty series that have gone on over the last 10 years, those races, they're good to watch. I mean, it's very exciting, really exciting. And now, like the ringer drivers that are not so much the ringer drivers anymore. Same thing that happened. Remember, Ron Fellows made a name for himself as a ringer.
Well, he was my first guest, and we talked about that a lot. And that position doesn't exist anymore in NASCAR.
No, it doesn't. By the way, there's a man, if you ever had a chance to go fast in a car, that's a pretty interesting experience with Ron. Ron's a good friend. I just have so much respect for him. He's so good at what he does. Mm-hmm. But so there's lots of stories in motorsport.
Well, yeah, I've kept you here for almost over 2 hours. But
you're kidding.
It's been 2 hours and 5 minutes.
I better get out of here.
Let me get your opinion on, and maybe you don't want to give best Canadian race car driver of all time or guy that you've seen, or maybe it's top 3, but I'm sure you've just recently mentioned a few of those names. You've been around long enough to have seen quite a slew of guys come through.
2 drivers that they're absolute standouts in my mind. But the way I view it would be quite different, because I view it from my perspective.
Sure.
Someone else may not agree with me, but they also have a different perspective. From a standpoint of understanding competitions, having been a racer myself, having won championships, you know what that's all about. Now, there are two names that I will give you that are still standouts in Canadian racing history. One is Ron Fellows and the other is Eppie Weetzes. Those are two people that it doesn't matter what you give them to drive. They won't mess it up. And the ability to not mess up is an extraordinary ability to have. And those two, there's a lot of drivers drive fast, but a lot of them mess up. But Eppie in his day, when he was going strong and he was Trans Am champion, you'd have to go back and you'd have to characterize what being a Trans Am champion meant in those days. Right. With Ron, winning the Daytona 24 outright in a road car, if you will, an extraordinary accomplishment. And Eppie and Ron shared two things. And maybe others can do it, but Ron and Eppie were capable of telling you the most intimate things about driving fast that's so interesting to listen to. Like, can you imagine 200 miles an hour in the Mulsanne Strait when it's raining? And so, ask Ron what goes through his mind someday when you do that. And Eppie never talked about racing at all. He was a very quiet man. He wouldn't talk about it, but he had the same qualities as a driver. He could drive anything. And so if you look at how successful Ron was, you look how successful Eppie is, over 20-year periods. We won't get into some drivers who are reputed to be Canadian drivers, but really aren't Canadian drivers. They're European drivers.
Sure.
So I mean, don't know enough about them. But anyhow, for example, I'll ask you: is Lance Stroll a Canadian driver? As one who's done a lot on your show.
Yeah, he was on the show. I mean, he was he born in Canada? I don't, but he's born in Montreal. I mean, he's got, he doesn't live here. He's got multiple passports. I would say he is, though, because I mean, you look at anyone's family and you don't have to look back more than usually one or two generations and they're European. Anyone here or they're immigrants, almost every Canadian is an immigrant to some degree.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're getting at. Okay, I get.
So I don't know. I would classify him. He has the Canadian flag flying next to his name in Formula One. So
I'll give that to you, except that Lance didn't drive very much in Canada,
right,
or North America for that matter.
Sure, and I understand that perspective as well.
Yeah. He's a good man. I've known him since he was that high. Okay, and that's just I'm pleased. I think right now Lance is a journeyman driver in Formula One, and I think he's turning into a really, really reliable driver. But think about it for a minute. If someone says that they think you're a reliable driver and you're going 225 kilometers an hour, lap after lap after lap. You got to have something going for you. There isn't a Formula One driver that I don't respect. I don't care where.
I completely agree. Completely.
I respect every one of them for what they do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I look at it, you know, Lance is still very young. And I think, you know, despite the current trend of everyone in every sport getting younger, I still think that you probably peak in racing after 30 or around 30 years old. I just think you become more mature. You've got more races under your belt. You haven't lost the edge mentally, certainly at that age. So, I agree with your statement there.
I enjoy watching Lance. He's picked up so much, and I guess now my curiosity as we sit here is watching Alonso go to Aston Martin and see. I think he's going to add a lot to the team. I really do. I'm not sad to see Schumacher leave because I think he was getting in the way of himself and getting in the way of others. And there's 2 or 3 drivers like another. Gasly is another driver who thinks the track belongs to him and no one else should be on it. You know, there's just I like to see some of these people moving around that don't, and other people coming in. And that's part of the points thing now is people coming in. If you look at if you look at the next drivers coming into Formula One, coming out of Formula 2, Dragovic is boy, that guy is good. That guy is so good. So I think we're going to see some really good talent. I don't know what I don't know what Latifi's going to do, if anything. But when you've had so many years of traveling the world and you know, just being in the highlight and, all the time, I don't know what you do after that. But I guess we'll see.
Well, he'll be a good race car driver if he continues on anywhere else he goes.
Exactly. So that's good.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I appreciate you sitting down and taking the time.
Well, I appreciate you asking, and the problem is when you get to be my age, you got so many stories that are all cooped up. You can pick on any one of them at any point in time. Anyhow, so that's good, and hopefully we'll do this again in another 10 years.
Absolutely. Do you have any parting words or any parting advice for whether it be race car drivers or anyone who just loves motorsports and wants to be around the track and whether it be just volunteering or to really make a living at it?
Okay. The motorsport industry, from a technical point of view, is a complex industry. And there's a university in England that people have gone to that teaches you the technical side of things. I think they still do it. I'm not sure. But now, to be successful in motorsport, you need to be successful in anything computer-related. It doesn't matter what it is, what area you go to. You know, if you look today at Formula One, they know the temperature of the tires throughout the whole race. Right. And it isn't that long ago that we used to check the temperature of tires once after you're off the track, which to me was always useless. But now it's real live. But so if you look now go to the highest level of motorsport and bring it down. Today, manufacturers want their people to be in things like Formula One because it teaches them very, very quickly about things. and it bypasses the learning curve exponentially, because now they get into Formula One as a technical person. You need to think, what's the problem right now, and what's the answer right now, and can we install the answer? Well, maybe not until the next event, but if you look now at a lot of forms of racing, they have two crews, one at the racetrack and then one at the so-called back at the factory. There's a whole other set of technicians are monitoring what's going on at the racetrack. Well, that whole area of if you look at the computer side, how do they do that? Like how do you run a race team from 12,000 kilometers away? That's a fascinating field. So I think someone getting into motorsport. What do you want to do? Do you want to drive? Well, if you want to drive, then you have to go out and pick something that you can do. Get into in Canada. There's not much to choose from. There isn't much racing in Canada. Single-seater tends to be 30-year-old cars. That doesn't work too much. Touring cars. Again, you have to have a computer degree to know what to do. So I would say anybody that wants to get into it, on the technical side, you have to have some specialty. And what do tire temperatures mean? The book on the support books that are given, and I've seen them for that English university, are really, I mean, they're really, talk about school books. They got everything in them, but it's hard to understand. You have to have a university degree to understand that book. But I know people who have gone to that university. They've got a degree, but they couldn't find paying positions back in North America. It doesn't pay very well. Right. So if you want to start a family, that's maybe not the place to be. But my advice would be to hook up on a volunteer basis to some race organization and find out what's available, who can accept your skills, sure, even though you're not charging them anything. Yeah. And just go out to the racetrack and start wandering around the paddock and talking to people.
I think that's great advice.
And I remember when I was young, I used to sit and look through the fence and say, gee, I wish I could be in there, from a spectator point of view. And today, as a participant, I would look through the same fence and say, gee, I wish I could be a spectator. So, so it's you have to learn how to build a car in order to know how to work it. But just go to the racetrack and just, because that's where it happens. It doesn't happen any other place. Oh, well, wait a minute. You got esports.
Sure. We'll leave that discussion for another day, though.
Yes. That's a whole other deal.
Thank you very much for coming on.
Okay. Thank you for having me.
Appreciate it.
Take care.